Okay, welcome to Chapter 5 Code in Action. So, in this chapter, we are actually going to be looking a lot at the whole idea of evaluating your user experience and finding ways to improve it. So, subsequent chapters, we'll be trying to improve that user experience using the platform capabilities. But in order to do that, you have to first evaluate the user experience, and that's going to be the focus here. So, there are a few files that we should be looking at. The first one we'll be looking at is look at this one, something called demo app. So if you will actually go to the demo app folder and pull up your app.py, it'll tell you a lot about what it is. So essentially, this is a script. Think of it like a minimal Flask REST API with CRUD endpoints, right? So your CRUD endpoints would be your health and your items, whatever the capabilities that you have, and an in-memory data store. So this is that product. So when you are building your product, your platform is a product, this would actually be that. So you can actually replace this app.py with any application that you are actually going to be building for your developers. So this gets containerized and deployed to Kubernetes. And so that's the part that we are going to be focusing on in this chapter so that you know how to do that, the process of doing it, as opposed to the actual functionality of what you're going to be building. So this will develop that full inner loop experience. So that's what the script is. The next thing that we will look at is our Kubernetes manifest. So within your demo app, you will also find a Kubernetes manifest. So what that is that this is your Kubernetes deployment service and HPA. Now, so we talked about horizontal pod autoscaler and the vertical pod autoscaler. So this is that HPA for the demo app. This sort of shows a production-like deployment with auto-scaling baked into that. That's the whole purpose of this one. So you can actually go through that and see what it is. Next thing that is an interesting one here is called this workflow.yaml. So this is interesting because this gives you a 15-step platform deployment workflow. So you can actually keep it as complex or as simple as it is. I thought it'd be good for you to see something a little bit more complex than a very basic one. So each step here, what you can see here, you can see multiple steps here. Each of these steps declares whether it is manual or automated. Then it tells you, or semi-automated in some case, and it also provide you things like your cost, your cognitive load, dependencies, and error proneness. So this is that input to what we're going to talk about next, which is this friction analyzer. So if you're trying to figure out, assess your user experience, what you really need is to understand what's the amount of friction. So that is the script. So Friction Analyzer, what it does is that it reads that workflow.yaml file that we saw earlier, and it sort of calculates a friction score on a scale of 0 to 100. It identifies the bottlenecks. So bottlenecks would be things like your manual steps, your cognitive load, your missing feedback loops, error-prone tasks. What else? I think it could also be looking at your serial dependencies. So then it sort of exports this whole thing in a JSON report with prioritized optimization recommends. So the next thing we will look at is what we call as this DevX survey. That is the DevX survey results. Let me just look at the DevX survey. Yes, here you go. Here is the DevX survey script. What this does is this is more of an interactive CLI survey. So this is something you have seen things like this early on in, I think, chapter one. So it's an interactive CLI survey that collects developer feedback on onboarding, deployment confidence, your documentation quality, tooling satisfaction, and feedback loops. A lot of those things. It collects that and then just computes a composite DevX score. And you can see a trend here. So I'm doing this over and over again because this is probably the best way for you to understand what is happening, within your enterprise or within your team without having to pay a lot of money to buy third-party tools and all that. You might eventually decide to buy it, but before you buy that, it's important for you to understand what goes underneath that. And that's the reason why I'm encouraging you to learn these ones. So what this does is, as I said, it computes that DevX score. Now, let's look at the next one, which is this platform KPI collector. This is an interesting one. What this does is that it collects the four DORA metrics. So we spoke about the DORA metrics, and DORA metrics are very popular lagging metrics. So this collects from your running cluster. So essentially your deployment frequency, lead time for changes, MTTR, mean time to recovery, and change failure rate are all computed from what is actually running in the cluster. So you might really, as you're really try and build more capabilities in here, as you're trying to do more deployments, you will find that in this case, your deployment is your demo app. As you're doing that, you will find that, hey, this is a way in which you can actually do DORA. So sometimes, and I do get this question like, how do I actually get started on DORA? So this is a great way to get started on DORA. So that's this particular script. Then the last one I wanted to talk about was this whole idea of test demo app. So anything that we do, we talked about doing things in a more test-driven development way. So these are essentially those unit tests that validate the demo app. So we looked at all of these. So your DevX survey, your friction analyzer, and your platform KPI collector. So that's basically what we are actually going to be doing today. Okay, so with that said, let's actually get into the process of running these and making sure that we can actually see how this all works. So first thing to do is we will actually we'll run the demo app, or which folder are we in? Okay, we are in chapter 5. So we'll first run this demo app. So good thing is that you can now see that the demo app is running on your local host 5000. So that is good. So in order for us to actually query the demo app and learn more from it, we should probably open a new terminal. So let's actually open a new terminal here, and let's see where I am. I need to go to chapter 5. Okay, I have my demo app here. Good. So now that we have the chapter 5 one running here, let's actually look at, see, that's not that, this one. This? No, I think it is this. Okay, so we are there. Now we can actually try and query and see what is going on. So first thing we do is you can actually do this on your browser too, but let me just run a curl command. So just you can see that now the localhost 5000 where we set up this demo app is healthy. It is running. That's great. So now next thing to do is that now we read from it. So how do you write? So we know that we use post to do that. So let's actually just set a post to actually create a new item there called test. So essentially we are starting this test one. So you can see that we started this demo app as a test. So you can see that worked. So next thing to do is then now let's go and see what is available there, right? I mean, so you created that, so you can use items and see what is there. So you can see that we just created this demo test. So that is good. Now, the next thing to do there would be containerize and deploy to Kubernetes. So now we set this up. We need to containerize and send it to or deploy to Kubernetes. So what that demonstrates is this full inner loop, right? So you're going from code to container to cluster. And this Kubernetes manifest YAML that we looked at earlier includes that deployment service and HPA. We looked at that. And that is how that auto scaling sort of works. We'll start by containerizing the demo app first, and we'll deploy to Kubernetes. Then remember the Kubernetes manifest that we looked at earlier. So we'll apply that. Now let's look at the pods. Excellent. So you can see that the pods are running right now. Okay, now that the pods are running, we can control C out of this one. And we should be able to go ahead and see if we can port forward the demo app to port 80. And then we can run a curl command to see if whether the deployment is healthy. Yes, it is healthy. So that's good so far. Now, let's move on to the next section, which is the running your DevX survey.py. So remember, these are the three tests that we are actually going to be running against our demo app. So this first test is what we call as devexsurvey.py. It's an, as we looked at, it's an interactive CLI that scores developer experience across 5 dimensions, right? So let's actually go ahead and run that. You will run this and it will ask you a series of questions. Based on the questions, it'll come up with a survey result. You can see that it takes value from 1 to 5. So based on the inputs are provided, it said that, hey, my overall DevX score is 66. So I would want you to, as you're working through this, I want you to really think through this and do your surveys and make sure that you provide the right kind of data. So once you have all that, the question is, shall I export that to JSON? I say yes. I want to save that as a devx results.json. Good. So that was my first test. The second one we looked at was this friction analyzer. So let's look at how that friction analyzer would work. So we are going to run the friction analyzer and using your workflow YAML and export that to friction report.json. So what it did was it went through this whole series of 15 steps that we had set up and figured out what the level of friction it has. It essentially came out with the assessment that's got a very, very high level of friction. So obviously, if you change your YAML file, you can find different results of this. So that is the second test. Now the third one is, again, you can also look at your friction report, right? And so your friction report would be, let's see, where was your friction report? So this is your friction report. So you basically find the JSON file there. Okay. Now, the third one is the process of collecting the platform KPIs. So we looked at that script also earlier. So let's look at platform KPI collector, and then that exports to KPIs.json. So you can find that these DORA metrics sort of shows up and puts it into KPIs.json. So you can KPIs.json, you can find my DORA metrics here. Okay, so now that I've done it, now it's time to run my tests. I need to see that if the demo app tests are passing. So I run my tests. You can see that. You want to see a little bit clearly, see that. So you can see that it's running PyTest. It comes up with the test results, shows that what's passed and what's failed. In this case, all of them passed. So that is the end of chapter 5, Code in Action. Thank you for watching.